All right, thank you. Listen, tonight I want to can we preachers have a conversation tonight? Can we talk? Can we have some preacher talk tonight? Because I believe that this is opportunity for us to share and sharpen one another while we at the same time we spread wisdom that comes from South Florida. We got Ohio in the house. We have Orlando, Central Florida, and the surrounding areas. There's some topics that I want us to kind of wrestle with tonight that I believe will help us as we continue to do ministry in 2024 and forward. First question that I have, and I'm going to ask for my brothers to help me, because we do have those that are listening, those that are watching, and so I want to make sure that I do, as Pastor Austin say, be mindful that we have a listening audience on the other side of the camera, and so we welcome you and thank you all for logging on with us tonight. But I'm going to ask my brothers, Greg Williams and David Rosa, bro, if y'all can help me to just make sure that we pass the mic to the preachers that want to share. This is the question that was posed to me, and I want to pose it to you all. And that is this, and this is open to anybody that wants to give in a response to this. Now living in a pre-COVID or post-COVID world, is there a revival on the horizon for the church, or do we have a decline looming in church attendance and activity? Given in the post-COVID world, is there a revival that we see on the horizon, or does a decline loom for church attendance and activity? Prophets, what do we see? President.
Great question. I was at the Florida East Coast Baptist Association when Dr. Frank Ray was the guest. And I raised the question to the Godfather, can the church ever come back to its heyday as it relates to its attendance, its vibrancy, its love for the institution? And Frank Ray said this to me, and I think it's befitting to share this because it pertains to the question. He said, Dr. Johnson, the Lord can cause or strike a revival any day, which suggests to me that I believe that even though yet it has not taken place, a revival will be stricken sometime soon. We have to be prepared and have the kind of mindset to believe that it can take place.
Right.
Anything outside of that, to dwindle or disbelieve in the magnificent move of God, we'll miss it when it comes.
Right.
So you don't want to think that the decline is the normal forever.
Right.
You must think that there will be a revival for the increase and the growth to continue to take place. That mindset must take place. So that's what I gathered from Dr. Ray when I raised that question, because I don't believe, and I don't want to put a preacher in here, but this coming out, I don't believe he brought it this far to stop it now.
Yes, sir.
The old folks say, I don't believe he brought it this far to leave us. So
right.
As a voice for the question, I denounce the mindset or the mannerism for us to think that decline is the norm. I shared with a preacher recently that when he was called to this church, I want to call his name, I said, failure is not an option.
Yeah.
You must succeed.
Right.
You cannot fail.
Right.
I don't care what it takes. You got to succeed in this area. And I say it because a lot of folk are watching you, but most of all, God gave you the assignment. That's another mindset to encourage a brother that we can do this. Mm-hmm. So no matter how much we've suffered with attendance not coming to where it should be,
right.
Don't think that's the norm. even though there's a norm that we have to adjust to, like Dr. Fonzo said last year with this social media and things like that, that's a part of our norm.
Right.
But when it comes down to the growth, multiplication of the church, this is my voice saying, and I'm not the consenting universal voice. I just believe that what I said to you, that a revival is inevitable. Thank you for letting me respond to your question.
Yes, sir. Pastor Dawson.
I believe I'm sitting too close to the president to be of a different mindset, but I actually have a different mindset.
Okay.
Again, first of all, the Bible says that there is going to be a great falling away.
Right.
And if we're not aware that that's falling right now, then we're actually asleep. So we constantly have revivals. I think the problem is the effectiveness of them.
Yeah.
Who's really getting saved? Who's really getting delivered?
Yeah.
Who's really changing?
Yeah.
I'm sad to say, at age 60, I'm probably less holy than I was at age 20. Because there's a lot of stuff I do now I never did.
Right.
I grew up Pentecostal. There's some stuff I'm doing now. Man, my grandma and I'm turning over in their grave right now. and I'm just saying. So
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure.
Right.
Yeah, we have revivals.
Yeah.
You see it every week. Some church in South Florida is having a revival, but what's the effectiveness of it? We just color coding and making everything be cute, but who's really getting saved? Who's really changing? Who's really doing? It's going through the motion now. I don't think. No, there's a great falling away, and I'm not quite sure if we are going to catch it, or we just made revivals. Yes, we have them, but what's the effectiveness of it? I grew up where the revival could last 2-3 weeks. Ain't nobody doing. I used to preach revivals for 5 days. Who does a 5-day revival now? Nobody. You better not even asking me to preach 5 straight days. Yeah. We don't do that.
People don't do 3 nights as much.
And watch this. And when we do 3 nights, it's 3 different preachers.
Yeah.
It's not one preacher preaching 3 nights to lay the groundwork, and from one night he goes to the next night, he goes to the next. No, we got 3 different cats coming in. All good word. But what relates to the one from yesterday and the one to tomorrow? So I'm not quite sure if we really are going to be effective unless we change.
Yeah.
Unless we change.
So and I want to pose this question, yet still continue on to those that have thoughts on it and want to hear that as well. Because Pastor Johnson says that, listen, we are on the horizon and on the edge of revival in our areas and country or even the world. Then on the other hand, Pastor Dawson says, well, you can have revival, but we're on a decline. And I guess for me, I have 2 questions. Number one, can it be both? Can we have a revival while we're declining at the same time? And then secondly, what mindsets should we have? Because Pastor Johnson mentioned about having mindset. What then should be the church's position and how we respond to whether we have immediate revival or inevitable decline? How do we minister in light of that? But I saw Pastor Johnson's hand and want to get Pastor Ken Johnson's hand. Want to get your thoughts on it as well.
Please keep my government name out your mouth. Thank you. Hey, get that camera out of my face. No, I'm just joking. I think, Pastor, and you are my pastor. God bless you. Love you, brother.
Love you, sir.
If we're talking about individual revivals at each church, are we talking about the revival of the church in general? I believe that the revival of the church in general is not only possible, but it's present if we seize the opportunity. And I know we're pastors and preachers. There's nothing new under the sun. This isn't the Lord's first pandemic. This isn't the Lord's first situation that he's had to deal with it. And unless he's imminently planning to return, he's always allowed the church to recover.
Right.
But a lot of it deals with what you've already dealt with, our attitudes and our mindset in dealing with it. I can only speak for the Friendship Church. That's the only church I've pastored. I think there is a revival going on among the people, not just because you preached the last one, but I think the church in general is being revived. There's a different attitude. There's a different mindset, and it's not. I'm thankful to the Lord that He's still adding. Now, every church is on a different level. He's adding to the folks are coming to the church. Are we packing them in? Standing room only? No, but we get more and more every Sunday. We still have people walking down the aisle. I thank God, and this is just my truth. The Lord sent 12 people on this past Sunday. Now, that may not be anything for Miami, but for Fort Pierce. And so the Lord is doing it, but I'm not a believer that the church is done. I believe it depends on and I'm not saying anyone else said that. I think a lot of it depends on our attitude and the actions that we take based on our attitudes. If as pastors you don't think it's going to happen, that's how you're going to pastor. That's how you're going to lead. But if you believe it, your attitude, your actions ought to reflect your attitude.
Yeah.
Thank you, man.
Absolutely. Great point.
I'm Johnny Barber, and I approve of that message.
Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Make a statement. I like listening to men and women of God who has the ear of God, because God has their heart. And one of the preachers I respect in this nation is Dr. Terry Anderson. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Terry Anderson preached a message 2 weeks ago, the church doing its job, from Matthew. The harvest is plenty, the labor is few. He dealt with that. And so Ken Johnson said a major statement. When I was referring to revival, I wasn't just dealing with the local churches having 2-night, 3-night revival.
Right.
I was dealing with that piece from a corporate perspective,
right.
Getting connected to that, hearing people, what he said, who has a heart and hands-on who want to do it, and getting connected to people like that, and then you'll see that thrust take place. Of course, a great falling away going to take place. I'm with my friend there, but until then, I ain't looking for it. And my job is to stay focused on, pray ye therefore to the Lord of harvest that they send forth laborers. I'm going back to that. My mindset is the gates of hell should not prevail against the church. So I let God do his job and Jesus do his job when he's supposed to come back. But I want to do my job with people who have like-minded spirit, who wants to bring that revival that Frank Way put the seed in my spirit, and Terry Anderson and the others who are thinking likewise. So we're together. We need this discussion, but I wanted to add that affirmative statement in love to let the brethren know, hey, this setting here, this is divine gathering here.
Right.
And this is great men in South Florida and abroad who come together to brainstorm and talk about ideas to improve our craft. But this subject matter, it must be discussed, and somebody got to stand and say something on it, and I had to do that today, and hopefully it'll go somewhere for the good of the body.
Awesome. Any other points? Yes, sir. Pastor Brian.
My comment would be the pre-work. How much work are we willing to do to prep for revival? You know, you'll never ever reap the harvest if there's no seeding, if there's no planting.
Right.
And so that's a piece that's often overlooked and left out, has been in many of our churches. Did we do any work in the field in preparation for revival? Even though I know revival really deals with our parishioners who have drifted away. However, we have always universally used revival to receive unsaved folk who've never come to the church. But what kind of pre-work, what are we doing? And those are the things, I say that because that's one of the challenges I put before our evangelism team. COVID came through, we veered off and stopped going. We changed our method to go back out and knock on the doors. And my comment would only be, what about the pre-work? Who's going to do the pre-work?
Yeah.
Because that's going to influence and help the whole revival of the community, of our churches, pre-work.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, man. I believe that there is much work to do. Speaking of work, I want to kind of turn a corner. We're talking about the church, and we in this, and many of us, most of us even inside this room, are not just preachers, but we've been called to be pastors as well. And so as pastors, the landscape of becoming pastors has been shifting. It's not the same as it once was. You have your traditional processes of church, preachers candidating for a church, and then the church selecting them, and we've seen it go very well, and we've seen that process go very, very bad, right? But then on the other hand, we are seeing the rise of interim pastors that are becoming pastors. And at one point, my father told me that at one point that if you were an interim pastor, you could not be the senior pastor. That was, no, you are out of the running. But now it's kind of like a trial period, and so it's grown into a new dynamic. And then you have what I've been able to be a part of, which is an actual succession plan, in which the pastor chooses his successor, and there's a process into becoming that. And we're seeing, especially in South Florida, we're starting to see more of that, even when it comes down to church mergers. And so we have Pastor Richard Dunn, whose son Pastor Richard Dunn, whose son succeeded him, and then Pastor Wayne Lomax, the Fountain, merging his church with the Cool Church, and the pastor there. And so we're seeing shifts. Pastor C.E. Glover and Pastor Curtis Ballard, succession. So how should pastors now, seeing the changing dynamics, does the pastor have a responsibility to put in place and plan a process for pastoring post his tenure? Or does the pastor just leave it to the church to handle that, or to the denominational leaders, which that is changing as well, because churches are not listening to denominational leaders as they once did in the past. So how do we as pastors and leaders, where do we feel our responsibility lies in kind of preparing for the future while still living in the present, if that's a subject we want to touch on? Pastor.
I think this is going to be probably my last time speaking.
No.
Yeah, but I think I'm obligated to speak on subject matters that I have some kind of discernment and reference. Mm-hmm. When the godfathers like Jackson, P.W. Williams, Paul Freeman, a whole list of those men, when they started transitioning, God started raising some other men to fill the gap when they was transitioning off. Kerr was in place, Fonzo was in place, DL was in place. Then comes Artie, then comes me, then comes Gaskin. So that old shift had moved off the scene, but God had placed new men on the scene to carry on those old men who left the scene. Believe it or not, other than Gaskin, the ones on the scene who I just mentioned, we going off the scene. I'm not saying soon, but we going off the scene. I'm trying to say it in love, y'all. I study this. Yeah, I study this. And so I said that because the new paradigm is twofold. That pastor who's in that group that I'm talking about is obligated to make sure that his successor understand the rich tradition of what our godfathers and our forefathers did. That can't be lost.
Right.
Then you're going to need people like Gaskin and others who are responsible to make sure when that core nucleus that's on the scene now, and I'm not saying we're going fast, they're responsible to be gatekeepers to make sure stuff are done right. So if the pastor don't lay that groundwork to get that new pastor in, then people who've been trained is responsible to go help those pastors do it the right way.
Yeah.
God's not going to leave a witness. God's not going to leave his church without a witness.
Right.
So I had to reference that because I studied it. I saw when the old Godfather was leaving and he raised up the ones I just mentioned. No indictment, nobody else.
Right.
And then the other brethren came along. You know, like Nathan, all of them, they knew, they were sure about their identity. They were not trying to compete with Jackson or Johnson or nobody. They just say, I got my calling, I was studying people.
Right.
And they work. It ain't about comparing, competing. It's about, here's my assignment. I ain't compete with nobody. I'm going to work my work.
Yeah.
And so they're watching too.
Right.
So yes, that succession plan is key. That's a great model, but don't negate the fact that there's still some gatekeepers who are responsible that the church don't be mismanaged because somebody has a desire to do something that God never approved of.
Yeah.
We still gatekeepers to protect the sacred trust.
Right.
I promise you, unless you talk about my wife and my kid, I ain't talking no more, okay?
Oh man, you good, President. You good, President. Now I also want to add a new dynamic that we're beginning to see now, in which some pastors or preachers are now enlisting or hiring agents, in a sense, to go find churches and put their resumes in. And so one pastor that we know in the city, hired an agency that found a church that nobody knew about, but it's a great blessing. The church is a great church, and he's now there. So how do we again, where our responsibility lies on that? Any other thoughts on that? Okay, so there's a question that was given to me, and this is it: how should the church handle with the high cost of living and the impossibilities of just making it work in South Florida? How should the church respond to cohabitation of its members? Shacking is what we're referring to. Hold on, we need the mic. So how do we respond to shacking in 2024?
Okay, now we're concerned now about that.
That's the question given to me.
Well, we've always responded. Those of us who have ventured in that area have always responded as to what's right, what's wrong. I don't think the cost of living now should give us the right to rubber stamp it's okay to live together when a person's not married. I mean, we shouldn't just have that question. We should have already been responding to that. It's easy to say living together. Grandma just said it was shacking, and folk are afraid to call it what it is. Mm-hmm. And I, for one, have always been responding to it.
Right.
That's just. And I'm Jimmy Bryan. I'm not Ken Johnson.
Right. But I've heard preachers say that cohabitating is not a sin, that there's no biblical verse that is against cohabitating, because it gives the assumption that there's activity that is not necessarily confirmed. And so now if the world or the church is adopting that philosophy, then how do we respond? So I heard Pastor Bryant, but how many of us in our churches, we have members that we know are cohabitating, and we have not addressed it, or we have. Do I need to move on to the next subject? We good? Okay. All right. I'm just asking the question. I'm just asking the question so we can have conversation. Okay.
First of all, I don't go look and see who's shacking in my church.
Okay.
And if I did find out, I'm going to tell them what's right, but they grown. And they have to give account to God for themselves. And then what you going to do, kick them out? And they probably your best givers.
Possibly.
So you pray, tell them what's right. Pray, because that's not the only subject that we need to address in the church.
Right.
There's so many subject areas, but the main thing is you just teach them what you're supposed to teach the Bible that's right, and let God do the rest. Because you're not their parents.
Yeah.
And even at their parents, when your child get a certain age, they're going to do what they want to do regardless of what you say.
Right. But what if they are in leadership?
That's a different subject.
Okay.
That's
If
a different subject.
got a deacon who's living with Sister Jones and they're not married, or preacher got a girlfriend living with her, how do you address that? And let's say that they're great givers.
But are they having sex? That's what I need to know. I think that's the question,
So,
because
right.
you know,
So that-
again, they might just be roommates. They might just. I'm saying they might just be roommates, because I agree with Wallace. I'm not going into the house. I'm not looking for something. Now again, if it's a known fact and they're in leadership, no, I think they should. You have to discipline that. You know, I'll never forget my niece got pregnant out of wedlock. She was a member of my church. Well, she was in the choir, so people get pregnant all the time. But because she was a part of the worship team, the moment I saw the belly, I sat her down. But watch this. I also set the dude down that made her pregnant. And both of them had to sit down, because he was in the choir too. They both had to sit down until the baby was born.
Right.
It was no respected person. You can't, you know, they bring the woman caught in act of adultery, but where was the dude? If you're going to punish or discipline, it's got to be across the board. But again, the cohabitation, the Bible says don't let our good be evil spoken of. But what if they're not having sex? What if they're not intimate? What if they're just roommates?
Or do we want to even ask that question?
You may have to ask. If they're in leadership, then you're responsible to ask that question.
Okay. All right. So if they say yes, we are, Reverend.
Then you have to address that and deal with it in the discipline issue, because what are we stating to the rest of the church?
Right. Yeah. Understood. Pastor Johnson.
This is in general response. So if you're going to ask them that question, are you going to ask the liars, have you lied this week? Or the gossipers, have you gossiped this week? Or, you know, where does it begin, and then where does it end? If we're going to ask these questions of our members, are we, and my friend Pastor Benjamin Parrott says, are we the sin police? Is that our job? Because what if you have an 85-year-old man and woman in your church? Not that they can't, but, you know, like you said, it's financially feasible for them to live together. If they get married, then they can't afford to live, period. So where does the questioning begin and where does it end? That doesn't answer your question, but I'd like to know in consideration of that.
Yeah, I think for every pastor, and of course, you know, especially the seasoned pastor in the room, understand that every pastor has to find that defining line that matches their convictions with the knowledge that that line may grow or may change with the years. There are some pastors that I know that say, Pastor, listen, I've grown in certain areas. So there's one pastor that I know that used to, every time a young lady got pregnant, she had to get out the choir. He says now that he doesn't make her get out the choir, because she's not just a sinner when she's pregnant. The sin is still happened even after the baby was born. And so, for him, he approaches it differently. And so for us, I'm just asking, how do we find that defined line? And how closely do we stick to that line before we become irresponsible as leaders? Yes, sir.
Know that there are elderly people.
Hold on, Brett, because we want to make sure that we hear people on the line.
Real quickly, do you not know that there are elderly people who will live together, not get married, because it will wreck their benefits?
Oh, yes. Okay.
But the church should always say what
That are
churches
in
say.
leadership.
Yeah.
Doc, listen, they can be your chairman or deacon in that situation. And so how do we deal with that? How do we manage that? Yes, sir.
And I agree with you. But it's according to that pastor own conviction. And I'm just give you a quick example. I had a young lady who was over my youth. She was director of youth. She married another lady. Had a wedding and everything.
Yeah.
It was brought to my attention. I wasn't invited to the wedding. Nobody was invited to the wedding. No. So I called her in with her mom came. And she said, before you say what you're going to say, Pastor, I believe I'm right. I said, well, you're right, but you're not going to be over the youth. Because number one, I have to give account to God on my conviction and what I believe in. And they left my church, which fine, but I was fine with it because I know I did what was right.
Right.
So that's what I'm saying. It got to be on your conviction, what you believe that you're going to be held accountable for, because you're leading these people.
Right. Absolutely. Great.
All right, shift. ESA. ESA. What is that? It's not emergency. Emotional support animals versus service animals. It is an issue that many of us going to have to deal with, or it will deal with us. We need to start talking about our position on it. Emotional support animals. More and more people are becoming more and more attached to the animals. They're becoming more and more like family. And now with the proper documentation, they're able to go places that they had not been in the past. My daughter was in college a while ago, and they had a no pet policy in the apartment. But then she moves in, and the girl has a cat. But they said no pets. But the girl claimed that, it was an emotional support animal. And the apartments held up that rule. Like if Steve was here, he'd say nobody want to get sued over it. And so Pastor Smith is dealing with it at Friendship. And my brother Art also has been dealing with it at Antioch. What happens when that comes to the church? There is legally a difference between service animals and emotional support animals. There is a difference because the emotional support animals ain't always trained. They have accidents, and sometimes they could disturb the service. But people have licensed therapists actually give them the documents. I was looking hard trying to find where that applied to church, and I could not. I found out that the American Disabilities Act does not endorse emergency support animals. You got me saying emergency. All right. I ain't even thinking about emergencies. Your daddy would have not made me do that, man. Emotional. So what are your thoughts? And Gaston has to go first because he brought it to my attention first, made me look over. I had therapists in my church, and I had to consult with them. My wife has great insight because my daughter and my sister-in-law, she loves her little dog, and I think we're just a step away from her trying to. And some of them are already bringing little dogs to your church. You don't know them. They be in a little. They already. They don't say nothing. And smuggle them a little cookie every night. But Doc Smith, talk to us, man.
Thank you, Doug Jackson. I have a couple situations with two very good members, effective members, active members, and one of which has been through a great deal of illness physically, and she has been now prescribed a ESA, and she is waiting for me to tell her when she can come back to church with her dog. Watch night, I had, and now she has a little dog that you can put in a case, and according to the restrictions of how they fly, etc., the dog has to be disciplined, cannot bark, has to be potty trained, etc. She follows those guidelines. My challenge, and I think it's the challenge, is going to be the challenge of the black church, is our people are by and large afraid of dogs. We have a great number of that. Then we have allergies to dogs. And so I started talking to different pastors, starting with Dr. Jackson and Duke and Johnson and others, and Art. And so Art said he had the issue to come up, and because Art has so much space, he could take the area that's known as the changing room, and he could just assign that room to that kind of situation. I don't have that. If they're going to be in my congregation, I'm gonna have to designate some pews for that, or a section for that. And my challenge again is the people that are not pet friendly, and the people that have the allergies, and people that are afraid of the dogs. So on watch night, I had a blind person come, who probably was not ESA, it was probably service, but that dog was this big, and he was sitting in the back, and it scared me. And so I had people. I literally had people that were moving, and I had the hospitality came up to me and said, "Pastor, what do we do? What do we do?" And so we had to make a decision quickly, and we did move them to the overflow room, and the guy stayed in the overflow room for about 5 minutes and just left. And he told my parking lot people on the way out that, this is not right, that my church won't let me bring this dog into the sanctuary, because even though we had an overflow room with screen set up for them, they want to be in the assembly. They want to be in the assembly, and so it is something that if you've not dealt with, you're gonna have to deal with it. I was on a flight from Houston to Chicago about 4 or 5 months ago, and a big dog sit right next to me, and it was a full flight. And I said to the flight attendant, I said, "Can you move me? Can you move me?" She said, "Sir, it's a full flight. It's a full flight." And I had to deal with Lassie the whole flight, and it was something that I thought about. I did the research just like you, Al, and I realized that it is almost unwritten how the church handles it. And so I think it's a great topic because if you've not had to deal with it, you're going to have to deal with it because these doctors and counselors are prescribing ESAs left and right. Left and right, because it is a form of a you know, when there's a shooting in the school, they bring dogs in, and they let the children pet the dogs because it's emotional support, and it's taken to a whole nother level now, and so, you know, we encourage the person that I'm dealing with specifically to just kind of join in virtually until we can make a decision on this. But at some point, we're going to have to deal with it and create a section for it that they feel like they're part of the worship experience.
Anyone else have any experience before there's any comment? Does anyone else? No one yet has had any experience with pets. Oh, Jake, yes.
So we had a homegoing service, and so the size of the church, you know, makes it impossible to see everything from the pulpit. And so we went to the gravesite, and the family was getting out the vehicle. I'm standing at the gravesite, and young girl gets out the car and drops this little four-legged animal, dog, out of the car, you know, and walks over. I said, man, I looked over to the preacher from the church. I said, hey, man, since when did dogs started coming to the gravesite? And they said, oh, Pastor, that dog was in the service the whole time. I said, for real? He said, yeah. And so, I talked to the chairman. At this point, you know, we have not addressed it, just kind of like how G is. But the good thing was that it was told that they were visiting from out of state for the service. But it's something that we also said that what happens when it's not somebody visiting from out of state? What happens when it's one of your members that has this emotional support animal and they come into church? What are you going to tell them? What are we going to tell them? And so it is something that has to be thought about, planned out. What's your policy or whatever the case may be? And then Pastor Smith is 100% correct. You know, you have people who are allergic, people who are afraid, you know, and so what happens then? You disrupt the entire flow of worship service because of one or two individuals.
Yeah, but just like you said, the dog was smuggled into the church, man. And a lot of pets have been to our services that we didn't even know about. Oh, dog, go there. So, but what is, you know, putting a no pet sign up in the church is not going to do it. How do you see this played out? Now, G, you ain't going to be able to get around that service piece, though. If they're a service animal, they can go anywhere. And so you're just going to have to deal with that. That's a legal issue. We need Steve here to tell you about that. But that emotional support animal. What do you guys? You guys going to take the fifth on that? On this? What do they do in Ohio, man? They don't take.
I'm just. It sounds facetious, but
Policies, it's part of your policy procedures. But the service dog piece, you're right, you can adjust your policy and procedure to override the law. If it's a service, we realized that. We did. After I made a decision on the cuff to put that person in the overflow room. That person left, and then I realized, okay, this person was legally blind, and it's a service dog. So that really is a legal piece that the church is not exempt from. They can bring their service dog into any gathering. Like I said, I rode on the plane a few hours with one. I mean, so it is what it is. But we've got to be able to condition our people, figure out if we need to have sections, whatever the case may be, because it's going to be you're going to be confronted with it.
Doc, if I have a section, it's gonna be some dogs in them sessions. If you allow it, it's gonna be on up in there. But I think as pastors, we need to know though that we don't have to condone emotional support animals in church. There's no law that we have to do that. And I think that we've got to be clear on that, and thank God for, virtual television, for those that want to hang out with their pet on Sunday. But we can't get to the point, because if you start allowing it, it's going to be on. And all the dogs ain't small. All the dogs are not smuggable. They be sitting with G on the plane, sitting with you on the pew, like that. And so, we wanted to bring it to your attention on tonight to let you know this. You talk about where the world is going. Times are not getting better; they're getting worse, and we got to deal with that. Chambers in the Grove, we got to be able to deal with that. They make those carrying cases so nice, you don't know what's in them.
I want to.
And I seen your dog.
I want to also, while we're kind of on that subject, we're talking about animals, but we also have to be prepared for children with disabilities. One of my key leaders has a child with disabilities, and there are conferences that are being birthed around the nation of how to help churches handle children who have disabilities, because our church is not equipped to handle them. And I think that that's something else that we have to now wrap our minds around. Children with autism and things of that nature, they tend to have loud outbursts and things of that nature. And she ended up joining our church because, key person, Major, Dr. Teresa Lee, joined our church, went to major churches, mega churches in South Florida. We were the only church that did not put her out when her child had an outburst. She went to major churches, and she is now has us in that mindset of, hey, we've got to be able to handle this, because this is also a thing. So just putting that in the atmosphere.
All right, any closing comments? We are going to have to wrap up. It's a little after 9, and we really said we'd be here from 7 to 9.
Friendship Church that denied access to the service dog was Friendship Miami. Oh, you want to put that in case Morgan and Morgan is watching, that was Friendship Miami. The Friendship Miami. Got that?
Mr. Facilitator, we need to take a stand on it so that we can be, and an ESA is not something that we have to legally open up to.
Is it with documentation that they're ESA with documentation, or I just love my pet and I'm just taking them to church?
The law doesn't say that you have to allow it, but the patient has been prescribed.
But Dawson.
I just think you saying a closing remark. I think we have to be mindful that anytime somebody walks in the church, the ministry of the church has to be prepared to deal with whatever it is. I used to say years ago, if someone sneezes in your church and stuff runs out their nose, you got to have a handkerchief ministry, because you got to help that person clean their nose. I think I get it with the dog, but I think the thing is, it's anything that can happen in the world now. The church has to be prepared for that, because that could be a potential member who has this problem, or a potential member who has that problem. So I think we have to have these, just like we have these sessions here, we now have to have this session at the church with committees in how we do that. Like we have the Pastor's Aid Committee or the Pastor's Anniversary Committee. You got to have the ESA Committee. You got to have whatever the potential problem could be, or the potential thing that you have to minister to. You have to have that in place. So it's great discussion, but now it has to leave here. And now, when I get home, my wife pastors the church. She was my successor, but I'm gonna mention to her, are we ready for ESA? And so I'm gonna ask her. You got to put. I'm gonna say, Dr. K, you got to put a committee together, because somebody may come in with a dog one Sunday, And I agree with you. Allergies, man, allergies. But then now you got to have an allergy ministry. So now we got allergies. Now we got to have a ministry for the allergies. You know what I'm saying? Anything can happen. You got to prepare for it.
Online.
Yes, Pastor. Online, one of the comments was, I don't think having a separate section for people with service animals is a good idea. There is a difference between emotional support and service animals. Yeah. I took a person to a church that would not allow her to play her tambourine. They put us in a separate section, and like the gentleman with the pet, we left because we felt unwelcome.
Yeah. Tambourine. All right. Okay. Was that the only comment online?
Yes.
All right. Brother Williams.
Praise the Lord, everybody. How's everybody feeling? Yes, son. All right, we're gonna pull the three winners. I got some Outback gift cards here, and I think Olive Garden, Longhorn, something. We're gonna give that away first. My son's gonna help me. Want to pull the first one?
The last three numbers: 076. 076. 081. Let's clap it up for him. Let's clap it up for him.
Is this a TV now? No. I'll wait.
Huh?
Okay, we called you earlier? Yeah. Come on. Yeah, okay.
Well, just go get him.
She probably got a shopping bag.
I will go to the grand prize.
Let's give her a hand, y'all. Let's give her a hand, y'all. All right. 085. Zero 85. You got show the ticket.
From Goose, man. Say it again. Hey, you heard it say it? Hey.
Where your ticket at?
Johnny.
Okay, well 085. We got a winner.
Congratulations, my man.
For what?
For what? I told y'all.
For the TV.
Reverend, I told you my copy.
Since he said, hey,
got a number for me.
check it out. Since he said, for what? I'll told it to my car.
I'm gonna donate it to one of the members in the church. A member in my church that does not have a TV and need it.
That's good, dog.
And I need you to come take a photo with these, all right?
I'll take a picture. But I'll give it to him. Cause I definitely don't have no more room in the house.
He said, for what?
Anybody else want to
Tell Brenda I'm gonna put it in this TV, she gonna put me out.
Congratulations.
I don't get that either. Anyway.
Get my backside.
Oh, no, I'm gonna get my sleep down. I'm gonna get my sleep.
Hey, in the morning, we're going to be at Shiloh. Yes, sir.
At Shiloh for the last section, Pastor Johnny Barberg, we presenting, and moderator Toby Philpart will be presenting in the morning. Our benediction will be in the form. You save it for in the morning? All right, he's going to save his song for in the morning. God bless you, everybody. We thank the beautiful campus of Florida Memorial for hosting us. God bless you. Safe journey, everyone. Peace of God is our prayer. Peace of God. Peace of God. Peace of God.